Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. And again, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to be here with you. And we have a great panel of experts to share on this super, super important and timely topic. So without much further ado, I think I'll turn it over to Johnny, who's going to just get us started with some questions.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was on mute, so apologies for that earlier non-reaction when I was introduced. What we're going to do to start is talk about really where we are today and have a chat with all the panelists about current situation before we move on to sort of further on to opportunities. And I'm going to start with Maya, based, as we know, in New York. And Maya, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. First one around really where we are today. And we'll start the ball rolling with a question about what are some of the specific ways today that the jewelry businesses in the States are collecting and using personal data? What are you seeing as of today?
Thank you for that question, Johnny, and good morning. So before I answer that, I want to just set the ground. What is personal data? So that term refers to information related to basically a human being, right? And information related to a corporation is not considered personal data under most laws. So information that can identify or directly identifies a natural person. So we're talking like names, ID numbers, location data, online identifiers such as an IP address. And then you could also get into more specific factors such as physical, physiological, genetic, cultural identifiers. So the ways you would describe a human being, right? So businesses are using this type of information in a few different ways. One, if you're collecting the IP addresses and locations of users to your website for analytics purposes, right? You may use that information to decide what's selling, what's not selling, and where. You know, if you're based in New York and you realize consumers in California are very into, you know, star necklaces, for example, that's a way a lot of businesses are using data to cater their sales and their decide, you know, which products are driving revenue from to different areas. Brick and mortar stores are using beacons, which are these physical Bluetooth wireless devices that you stick in different parts of your store where you can measure foot traffic. You can measure, you know, the time that people linger in different areas of your store. And you can use that information that you collect to then figure out, you know, how to set up your sales floor. And similarly, you know, people are using information about, you know, foot traffic to then analyze how to keep their, you know, what times their store should be open, how much staff they should have in their stores at particular times, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting stuff. And obviously these various different ways of using data, collecting data, do come with risks to some extent. And I just wondered how you think jewelers should sort of mitigate that risk as much as possible. You know, what can they do to make sure they're not caught in a difficult situation?
Yeah, so jewelry businesses, you know, as any other businesses, especially in this day and age, should be very, very aware of the various data protection and consumer privacy laws that exist. So in the US, we have the most strict, or one of the more popular ones is well, I don't want to say popular is the best word, but one of the more strict laws and extensive laws we have here is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is acronym CCPA, which applies to data collected about California residents. And that's been applicable to businesses who deal with data of California residents, whether they're based in California or outside, since 2020, January of 2020. We also have the GDPR, which I'm sure all of you've heard about for the past few years. That law applies to EU and UK data subjects, i.e. residents of those places. And that also applies extraterritorially. So if you collect the data of people in those member states and countries, even if you're based in the US, you have to comply more than likely with the GDPR. So companies should be very well aware of their legal obligations, and also under both laws and other state laws in the United States, you have certain collection, certain notice obligations. Do you have to let consumers opt in or opt out of the collection of their data, sale of their data, use of their data? And I just recommend overall talk to an attorney, hire someone if you don't already have someone to analyze your data, because you could be using it effectively, but you want to avoid any issues if it gets into the wrong hands or is misused.
Yeah, no, it's a complex area, no doubt. And I'm sort of thinking of the small jeweler sitting in, Oklahoma, let's say, and their concerns about GDPR in the UK. I mean, it's someone on holiday. I mean, you just don't know, do you? So has the JVC produced guidance to its members that's used in the United States, to help them with these sorts of issues? And can you share a few of the highlights of that guidance? Because I believe it is there. And what sort of things do you provide through that?
Yeah, so JVC, we act as one of the legal industries, the jewelry industry's legal voice. So in that regard, we have produced several articles on the topics of privacy and data security. Original and law firm partner law firms that we collaborate with. You see Ed just dropped it in the chat, so you can check out a couple of those articles, and we have additional series of articles to come. But we are a very dynamic organization. We deal with a lot of topics. This in and of itself is an entire practice area. So if you want legal advice and really, really specialized technical advice in this area, you should definitely hire a law firm, technology partner, or a business that specializes in this area.
But you are there to help as a first step, I believe.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Very high level help. Yeah,
that's great. Anyway, look, I've asked a few questions of you. Thank you very much. That's a great start to this afternoon, and wherever you may be, maybe the morning. Tiffany, I think it's over to you now.
Thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. And I have to say, I'm from Oklahoma, and I can confirm we do know people from London sometimes. So Stéphane, we're going to go over to you. It's so nice to see you this morning, for me, the afternoon for you maybe. So hoping that you can address how retailers, establish that trust in that commercial relationship between them and the consumers to allow for the collection of all of this personal data that we're talking about.
Yes, thank you, Tiffany, and equally happy to see you. First and foremost, I think we need to make the difference between consent and trust. It's not the same thing. I think it's important to understand when people are asked to agree to share data on a website, entering a retailer's website, very few will spend the time to choose the kind of data they are ready to share. Most of them will press the button, I agree, just to start their experience, their shopping experience. Now, to really earn the trust of the consumer and to access more relevant data, there are two things I believe needs to be addressed. First, the assurance that you will keep their data secure, and most importantly, give them a value-added shopping experience in exchange of them sharing private information.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're going to keep going around the horn here as we establish sort of where we're at. And we're going to come over to you, Eric. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Tiffany.
I have a huge question for you. So just pick the small part of it that you'd like to address. But how do you see that data is changing the relationship between supplier and retailer, specifically in this like very online environment where we're all in now?
Yeah, well, so at the Jewelers Board, we've kind of seen it in three different areas, right? That with the COVID crisis, the increased use of data, so it's outside of personalized data, just the increased use of data allowed retailers to essentially more effectively plan their inventories. And that reduced their amount of inventories they needed and increased the inventory turns and basically increased the efficiency in the channel overall. So just the increased flow of data that jewelers kind of knew who was coming in before they came in and things like that helped them to do that. At the same time, we're seeing retailers seeing this increased flow of data to be an opportunity to sort of level the playing field, at least from their perspective. That essentially the fastest growing area in our business right now is actually retail memberships of retailers trying to figure out, okay, now I can get data about suppliers. What data can I get about them and so forth? And when it comes to the personalization piece, what we're seeing already is very early days, but sort of an increased tension between the suppliers and the retailers, because the retailers are obviously getting a lot more personalization info, right, to better manage their business and so forth. And the suppliers would love to scale that data up to help them plan their product lines better, right? So they'd love to get their hands on that information, and how they can do that in such a way that protects everybody. Well, that's obviously going to be a challenge going forward.
That's really fascinating, actually. And seems like it enhances some of the existing tensions that kind of exist between retailers and suppliers. That's very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
There are tensions?
Oh, no, just kidding. Everything's hunky-dory. So Michael, coming over to you, prior to working in the jewelry industry, you worked in the data-rich consumer sectors of so-called FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, and small domestic appliances. What sort of data was available in those sectors, and how did you use it to benefit the business?
We had data coming out of our ears. It's fantastic, and it probably says it all that, you know, we've been getting 130 people on average in the audience. The data, it's down to about 50. It isn't very sexy, but people fail to grasp that, in my opinion, the profit is in the data and how you use it. I started life with a company called Procter & Gamble. You may have heard of them over in the States. And that's where I was really exposed to data in the form of market share. Brand managers would share their activity plans or their new product launches with the sales team, and it's always about market share, market share. I think somewhere in the loft, I've got a crystal paperweight celebrating a 1 millionth sale of Ariel Auto that gained us low suds market share. Market share was the battleground of the big brands. And the retail sales EPOS data was purchased from data giants like GfK and Nielsen. Suppliers bought it, retailers bought it, the analysts tracked it, and they all used it to guide their decisions and increase their market share. And such was then, and still is, the importance of retail data. On a local level, because very often I work with retailers and they say, but we can't get the data. Then find it, create it. I lacked on an operational level when I first joined P&G that data, but it was there on a national level. So I take that national level data and take it to my Asda superstores, known locally as Walmarts in the US, and they were turning over at the time millions of pounds a week even then. On a Friday afternoon, I'd go in and do a visual data check on my sales. I'd look at the floor displays, and then on the Friday, once I'd topped it up, I'd go back in and I'd be pushing the manager and saying, your national planograms for your store layouts on the shelves of low suds, they don't reflect your local demand. That's why I was topping you up. And there are lots of examples when you can gain data on your market. And it really worked well. During my time in the electricals, when I moved over to small domestic appliances, very similar for all the same reasons, market share growth. And at the time, as a sales and marketing director, I was spending over £100,000 a year, £100,000 a year purchasing data from GfK, because it told me physically what was being bought by people in each channel, by end consumers, not just about what was being pushed into stock, but what the consumers were purchasing. It gave me total market data, so I could see what other brands were selling. I could see the actual sell price for my 4-slice Swan toaster in British Racing Green compared to my competitors. 4 sliced green toasters. I could see the effect of a £5 reduction, and I could forecast the data I bought that was available in the market from GfK. I could forecast how much market share I could potentially secure, say, for example, with £1 million Christmas advert on a 2-slice, self-cutting, easy clean sandwich toaster. And I could present that to the board about my marketing plan, and they would have the confidence because they reduce the risk and sign it off. So in my time in these sectors, FMCG and small domestic appliances, they taught me 2 lessons about data. The first one, an opinion without data is just an opinion. And the second one, whether it's big data or small data, if you don't use it, it's just data.
Well said, and thank you for making it so concise with the two highlights. Anything else you wanted to share about what you've seen in the jewelry industry? I mean, you talk about how sophisticated the approach has been for quite some time and effective in other industries. Any tidbit you'd want to share from your experience in jewelry?
Well, it was landing in the jewelry industry 20 years ago with Cooks and Precious Metals, one of the largest suppliers of jewelry materials and components into the industry, was a shock. Because how do you run a business without data? There was no reliable, independent market sales data for jewelry. And I was stunned. And what little independent data there was seemed to be focused on the watch brands when I last looked. And watch brands, far more attractive sector in terms of size and brands, excitement, and available data budgets. Don't forget, I come from an industry where I was spending 100K just buying this data. But there also seemed to be no appetite for market data in the jewelry sector. The UK businesses seem satisfied just with the hallmarking stats, which over in the UK reports units hallmarked to go into stock by alloy. And I suppose what you've never had, you never miss. In my mind, there was a crazy situation, knowing what type of product was being hallmarked, but only recording the alloy. It was bonkers and such a missed opportunity. I was much younger then, I even offered to contribute to the cost. I went to the assay office and said, look, I will contribute to the cost of you compiling this hallmarking data into product categories alongside your existing alloy categories. Still no interest. I then offered to find a group of manufacturers, not retailers, manufacturers and suppliers who would purchase this hallmark data if they supplied it in product category. There was some interest, again, but not a lot. And there's some consumer research available for the jewelry sector at the time, but I didn't have enough confidence in the interview diary type research, which, guess what, offered an opinion and not data. And as I said earlier, an opinion without data is just an opinion. I wanted hard retail sales data, and that didn't exist outside my multiple retail jewelers who had their own EPOS systems and had critical size. And I worked closely with these guys. We engineered alloys to reduce jewelry product returns, triggered by the high percentage of returns they were getting. So we used the data to spot the opportunity. But do you know what? It stumbled on the buyer's desk when they'd say, well, okay, but if we introduce this new alloy in this new collection, what did it say about the rest of our jewelry? We worked closely with the retailers that had the EPOS data on ranging. We'd share price points and volume commitments, and we developed as a supplier a make or buy strategy based on the data because it took out the risk, gave us more confidence. And I could go on, Tiff. But
well, thank you. Those are really illuminating examples. And I think we've heard from all the panelists and we've sort of situated ourselves in space and time on the issue. And so we're now going to go into sort of challenges and opportunities, and I will pass it back over to Johnny.
Sure. Yeah, so in terms of opportunities, I think I'd like to ask Eric really a question around what do you see as the key opportunities for, for example, US jewelers in terms of using this data, collecting and using it specifically. And maybe some of the things Michael said from previous industries, how are we as an industry in the States at the retail level using that opportunity today? So it'd be really interesting. Are we using it enough?
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear Michael talk as someone coming from outside the industry, because I myself also come from outside of the jewelry industry. And in terms of looking at the data and the consumer data and how it flows and so forth, obviously the COVID crisis was a great kick in the pants and sort of solved the chicken and the egg problem, right? There was a lot of folks that said, oh, we're not going to do a lot of online business because our consumers don't want it. And consumers were not doing online business simply because it wasn't available and so forth. And everybody was sort of forced into that role. And as a result, we are sort of seeing the early days of sort of the benefits of that, the consumer data that's enabled through more online and omni-channel interactions. And we kind of see it in sort of three different areas. One is, as I mentioned before, the ability to sort of more efficiently manage your inventory, because you understand more in advance of what is selling and what isn't selling and what are the consumers interested in, whether they're doing pre-shopping online, that sort of thing. As we mature as an industry in this area, the ability to sort of better target your marketing and other efforts to the strengths of whatever it is you're selling, right? So a better match that you have. But on the flip side of that, from a more competitive nature, you're also going to see, because the data is more available, that enables a much more rapid scale up of, for example, startup businesses. And as a result, I think you're going to see a lot more sort of online-only solutions, online-only selling, and basically a proliferation of sort of smaller retail stand-ups, which is going to create a whole separate set of trust issues, because there'll be good ones and there'll be bad ones and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so in the larger sense and sort of the longer term, you can see this focus on data really driving businesses in a quite a different direction, I guess.
Yeah, and I think one of the things the jewelry industry, and maybe Michael will agree with me on this, the jewelry industry is going to have to get used to is usually higher data flows means more efficient pricing in the long run. So to the extent that there's been a lack of transparency in the industry forever, for a long time, as that transparency increases, naturally margins will decrease a little bit, because you end up, as transparency increases, you typically are increasing the power of the buyer lower and lower down the supply chain.
Michael, you're nodding in agreement. Do you want to join?
Other than say you're right.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting though, Eric, just thinking about, we talk about risks of data, but of course opportunities are tremendous. And I think when you think about the bankruptcies in the industry in the last 20 years, many of those related to holding completely the wrong inventory for years and years in store. And, pretending it was valuable when it came to the balance sheet. And then in reality, you ended up in a situation you didn't have a viable business. So I would have thought there's a sort of very useful risk-averse scenario related to data capture, that you actually shouldn't end up building inventories that, are imbalanced.
Yes, but there is no magic bullet, right? Because how you actually analyze the data and use the data, obviously that's not necessarily an easy lift, depending on what you're doing with it.
Yeah, no, and we know we have to be careful, as we heard at the beginning of this session. Great. Tiffany, I think over to you.
Yeah, so picking right up on that point, Eric, and going over to Stéphane, what do we do about, when you're in the situation where you have too much information, too much data, and you're just overloaded with it? How do you prioritize how to best use it?
Yeah, exactly like Eric said, it's not an easy lift when you get this huge amount of data that your own technology is generating. So it's up to you to know where to apply, how best to apply, how to read it, how to direct it to your business in the most efficient way. It's not easy, but never be shy to ask advice. I mean, there are people who can guide you, who can help you. It's what Michael said. A lot of people have just refused to get into this data sphere because they're afraid of it. They don't know how to read it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know. But there's absolutely no There's absolutely no other way to do today to lead your business. You have to rely on the information that your business produces. On the other hand, too much information also relates to your relationship with your consumer. And that's also important to know, especially in the jewelry and the diamond jewelry sphere. You get more and more information from your suppliers, but you need to manage carefully the load of information that you get towards your consumer. You don't want to spoil what I would call this kind of emotional experience that your consumer comes to you with, is emotionally loaded. He comes to you because he really is interested in your product. He wants your product. So managing this kind of load of information that you have towards a consumer is something very important. And I guess the most talented retailers know how to calibrate that.
And can I add to Stéphane's point? You also don't want to be collecting too much, because at the end of the day, you have certain legal obligations. So if you're collecting more than is reasonably necessary to achieve a valid business purpose, then you may very well be placing your company at risk for certain compliance issues related to GDPR, CCPA, and other relevant legislations.
Great point, Maya. So it sounds like for legal and risk and commercial reasons, you want to be really use discernment around how much and what exactly you're collecting.
Yeah, that sounds very true. I think, should we move on to Michael again? I'm quite intrigued with what some of the things he was saying, but for an independent jewelry retailer listening today, what advice, specific advice, would you give them about collecting and using data? You know, because you've talked about some of your historical experiences, but I think they would love to hear, you know, sort of 5 key things they should be doing today with data that will give them a competitive advantage.
I'd say there's lots of data out there, even if it's not the official GfK source data. And this is a message also for manufacturers, suppliers, as well as retailers. And Johnny, you were saying earlier about it doesn't have to be complicated. And stock, the conversation on stock, dead simple. Have a look at your stock and determine what percentage of your stock that you have that you bought that year or manufactured that year and put into stock, you sold that year. And what percentage you sold in the second year, and what percentage is 3 years old and growing a beard you've had forever and a day. Data doesn't have to always come from outside. You've got data in your own business. Whether it's as a retailer, we used to go out and do window audits. Every Christmas, we would window audit. So we'd stand in front of the multiple retailers, key 7 retailers, and believe it or not, we'd count on average 10,000 SKUs. We'd dice it, slice it on a spreadsheet, again, not rocket science, and then we'd sit with each of the 7 buyers and talk about the trends. So there's plenty of data, even if you rely on DIY data. In terms of pieces of advice, do more with what you've got. I think what I've just said there, be mindful of rubbish in, rubbish out, but just get started, because the important thing about getting started is just getting started. If you haven't got a system that collects data and you're in retail, you need one. And if you don't know where to start, when it comes to a good data management system, if you're in the UK, get hold of the National Association of Jewelers. They'll direct you to a number of reputable system suppliers. Know what you want from the data, what you want to measure. Is it stock? Is it stock turn? Is it age of stock? And decide on your KPIs, jargon for key indicators. Be selective. Don't try and have too many. Go for 5. It's simple. Focus on the areas where you've got pain points, the areas that are causing you problems. It could be the amount of repairs you're currently taking in and you're only averaging 3 an hour. And really, as much as you enjoy the cash on repairs, you want to sell jewelry. So focus on your pain points. Don't use the data to support a preconceived idea. Don't make the data fit something you've already agreed on. Bit of jargon coming along here. Be assured it's cheaper to fail on paper. So in terms of my planning in previous industries, we use the data to test because we hadn't spent any money. We hadn't gone with a project. It's cheaper to fail on paper. If you could it's already been alluded to, and Maya mentioned it in terms of consumer data and protect it. You remember the recent graft hack where a cyber gang stole 11,000 high worth client details? In preparation, I contacted 3 CEOs of local cyber businesses and said, how much would you charge me for protecting a database of 10,000 clients? You know, I've probably just got names, addresses, and emails. And to cut the long replies short, the typical process price seemed to be, you have an initial audit and a vulnerability check. That's about £500 to £1,000. And then from then on in, it's going to be about £100 a month servicing. It's not prohibitive. The cost is not prohibitive, but potentially, I suppose, if Grafter said, though the question should be, what's the cost to your business of not securing client data? Benchmark yourself with other sectors. How else will you know if you're doing a good job? So you've got all this data. How do you know whether it's good or bad? And in the UK, as I was introduced, I facilitate for the NHA a network of retail jewelers sharing their knowledge and expertise and their performance data. So these guys have the confidence, Chatham House rules, every month they submit their data to me under a confidential store number. I compile it, and that data includes sales, gross margin, average sell prices, stock holdings, stock turns, sales by product category. Yes, I like sales by product category. And they benchmark themselves and they support one another, because data can be gold dust. I said that's where your profit is, the easy to low-hanging fruits in your data. Data can be gold dust, but if you use it correctly, or it's just dust if you ignore it. And as has already been said, a final tip would be join a retail jewelers network community near you.
Very good advice and some great ideas there. And I think capturing those is a great way of retail jewelers around the world, implementing a strategy on, as you say, sort of 5 key points. You need to focus. So that's a great, thanks, Michael, very useful. Maya, we were also going to talk a little bit more today, if we have time, and I think we have, about the GDPR and the equivalent US privacy legislations. Is it a fair question for the start to ask, what are the key differences? Can you easily explain the key differences between the two?
Sure. Before I answer, can I just piggyback off of a point Michael just made about the cost of not protecting versus the cost of protecting? It's not just even a potential financial cost, right? If you're hacked and your business is being held for your business information is being held for a ransom. It's also reputational, right? If you're, you have some very important clients, now the amount of money they spent is public, right? Or potentially can become public. Maybe their address and stuff that they, normally wouldn't want the world to know, if the data is not properly protected, is now out. And that's also a reputational harm. I personally, before I do business with any company, I'm on, one of the popular search engines, and I'm figuring out, what's their reputation. And if I see something about a breach or ransomware or something like that, and it's attributed to something that could have been fixed, right, which often it is, I'm probably not going to do business with that company. So just keep that in mind as well. So most important differences, I would say, so GDPR requires, and this was one of the more controversial but important aspects, users to affirmatively opt in to the processing and collection of their data, which is why, since it went into effect a couple of years ago, almost every website you see, there's a pop-up suddenly before you can enter the website. If you have to click, yes, I'm okay with this data. And there are different areas of processing, right? What is required for functionality, usually opt into that or out of that. What is required or what is not required, but they're asking for you to consent to, for marketing purposes. I personally often opt out of that before I enter a website, and so on and so forth. Whereas the CCPA does not require affirmative consent to opt in, but it does require your business, if you're a covered entity, to provide an opt-out function. So, you have to provide an easy to see, easy to use opt-out function for the sale or sharing of personal data. So keep that in mind, because I think Michael talked about earlier, you can buy data, you can sell data in some instances, but you want to make sure you're doing it compliantly and ethically. And you want to make sure that you're transparent with your consumers. And I'd say that you should keep that in every business decision you make, whether you're covered by the GDPR or the CCPA or not, just because consumers expect to know these types of things these days.
Yeah, so building on that, is it easy for a retailer to understand the legislation around privacy? I mean, the law is always a challenge, isn't it? It doesn't really matter what we're talking about. And there's always two sides to every argument. So, where does my jewelry retailer go, or how do they sort of make sure they're feeling comfortable as they go to bed at night? How can they rest easy?
Well, I don't know if anyone can rest easy these days with all these laws. But I guess if you want to, rest a bit better, I'd recommend doing, Michael talked about earlier, getting a provider that will contracting a provider for monthly service, a bit of an audit on your information. In all of my talks on this topic, I always tell our members at JVC, take a survey. What data are you collecting? Do you need to collect that data, or are you doing it for fun? Are you going to use it? Do you have a valid reason for protecting that, for collecting that data? Where are you storing it? Who has access to it, right? Does everyone in your organization need access? If not, you need to cut that access off. So basically, take a survey of what data you're collecting, where you're using it, hire a service provider. And I would also say, if you don't already have it, get cyber insurance. A lot of insurance providers now have this option to add on to existing business insurance. And they also will then recommend the insurance companies providers for your different data protection and privacy and security services. So I would say start there, hire data insurance, hire somebody to help you protect the data, and in collaboration with all of that, do a survey of what you collect, why you collect it, make sure you have a valid purpose for that collection.
Great. And one thing to remind everyone is that trade associations play a very important part in information around this area. Certainly, some are obviously better than others, some are more expertise, but I think Michael mentioned about trying to become a member of your local associations and things, and I think it's a very good point. There's a certain, you do gain more knowledge, and you can network, and you can talk to your let's say competitors in a friendly way about these sorts of challenges, which I think is always good. It's always good to talk about these things. So yeah, I think that was another very interesting point. Trade associations and people like the JVC in the States, like yourselves. Cool. Okay, so I think we're going to talk about going forward now, and I think I'm going to pass back to Tiffany about what the future might be like.
Thanks so much, Johnny and Maya. Pardon me. So Stéphane, we're going to come back over to you, and pardon me. Maya started to get into this a little bit, but from a commercial perspective, what are some super practical next steps that businesses can take in managing both the opportunities and the risks that we're talking about?
Well, there's a lot of what Michael said, very eloquently in terms of what businesses can do. One of the issues is really to segment a little bit all your processes in your business. I mean, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, whether it's your cost structure, your consumers, and so on. And stay, like Michael says, stay curious of what is out there. Talk to your competitors about tech providers, new technology, how to obtain better data, and so on. I mean, this is part of the strength profile of your business going forward. You really need to stay on top of this and continue to be curious about getting more data, better data, know how to use data. One issue is also related to risk about, like Maya was talking about, when you have a breach of data. And I would advise everyone to rediscover a very simple solution: offline. Keep copies of your data offline. Everybody loves the online because it's easy. Easy is dangerous and risky. So yes, all your business is online, but please keep regular copies of your data offline. You need to be very, very focused on this. Not only you, everybody working in your organization. You cannot allow, this kind of mistakes that we saw happening, I guess, to one of the leading jewelers these days, where a huge cache of data was leaked through ransomware. I mean, most of the time, like Maya said, it is because a mistake of one of the sales associates, most of the time. So really, really rediscover offline and really be careful about your own gold, as we say, your own data.
Absolutely.
That's great advice.
So, Tiffany, were you going to ask another question, or
yeah,
you want?
Yes, I was going to toggle over to Eric for a second and talk. We've talked about sort of the flood of information and data and how to best prioritize it. We've talked about some of the risks of over collecting or having too porous of a system. Do you see any counterbalancing forces coming in that are going to ultimately serve to reduce the amount of personal data that's even available?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it a couple different ways. One is when we call it on the demand side, so the demand for the data. I think from a counterbalancing or reducing that need, it's been covered by other folks in a certain respect already. One is obviously the legal piece, the changing regulations, that sort of thing. And those are not going to get looser; those are going to get tighter. They just will by their very nature. You also have changes in, I would actually say, even from as a business owner, or not a business owner, but someone who runs a business, changes in how cyber insurance is being underwritten, right? So as you'll find every year that it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And they in both ways, they require more of you and they cover less. And so that kind of on the demand side, you start thinking through, okay, what sort of data should I really have and what should I not have, right? On the supply side, I think there's sort of two different factors in terms of people being willing to give their data over. One is you have a whole series of technology companies that are out there that essentially are now kind of focusing on privacy as a feature, right? So depending on what your audience is, you may have already been impacted by the change that Apple made in their privacy features in the latest rollout of their iOS for mobile phones, where essentially any email that goes to an Apple device, if they're running the Apple Mail client, it automatically opens it and says that they opened the mail, right? And so now all of a sudden that data becomes kind of worthless because it doesn't help you at all. And I think that you're going to see more and more technology companies moving towards that sort of privacy as a feature, but sort of within their own silos. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And then the last piece I think that's going to drive the supply side, or people being a little more wary, is I do believe there's going to be an increase in basically cybercrime focused on the jewelry industry, because it's early days for us from a technology adoption perspective, and just the way the inventory works and everything else, it's just right for that. So I think, the trust, there's going to be events happen that's going to drive a lot of trust. We've already seen some. I think there's going to be other events that are going to happen that are going to drive that down.
Okay. Ooh, well, I hope everyone heard that. That sounds like we better keep our eyes wide open as we move forward. I think really we'll finish before final thoughts that Tiffany will run through. But I think, Michael, just one last question for you, which is, you've talked about the past, but obviously the future is the most exciting thing for all of us. And I'd like to know what you think is going to happen in the retail environment in the future, with technology, automation. How important is personalized human experience is going to be when you enter a store in the future?
What does the future look like for jewelry retailers?
Yeah.
Well, encouragingly, any jewelry retailer that has stock to sell from this Christmas already holds a trump card, given the global supply issues on other gift products. So retailers, make sure you maximize that message of pick, pay, and take away today. And so as we've already mentioned, there are online jewelers reversing into bricks and mortar, this dynamic between online and bricks and mortar, clicks and bricks. So we have established click business, e-commerce businesses reversing into bricks and mortar, like Blue Nile, like Amazon, because their data tells them that at the moment, the majority of customers making such an emotional purchase want to engage in a personal purchase. They want to see, touch, hold, feel before they buy, especially if they're making a significant, say, 5-figure purchase. Of course, there will be some who continue to shop online because of speed and convenience, brand and price matching. But the red flag for me is that retail jewelers, traditional bricks and mortar retail jewelers, need to take note of is this. Your affluent baby boomer customers, my age, upon whom you've probably built your retail business, are very different to your millennials and certainly your Gen Zs. For example, these generations grew up with these attached to their arms and laptops and iPads and digital technology and automation. It's at their fingertips, it's in their DNA. They also express, in my opinion, different purposes, values, buying motives. They want different experiences, and they expect retailers to have an opinion on sustainability, ethics, lab grown, fair trade gold, and ignorance isn't acceptable. It's not a justifiable use. As someone said to me, you know, if I know about it, you should know about it. There's no excuse. And this environment is not going to get simpler anytime soon in terms of the march of technology and then the march of purpose. So for me, the opportunity for the retailers, ensure the staff reflect the values, what they want to be known for, and the demographics of those they want to attract. And again, another trump card they have, particularly the family businesses, they may have next generation in their businesses, millennials coming through themselves. And what a great topic to give them. What a great opportunity to say, son, daughter, niece, nephew, I need you to help me remodel our business for the future. This morning, I made a call to a Jet Business Network member who is a millennial, i.e. under 40, who manages their family jewelry store and has been selling jewelry because he brought the online jewelry to the business, his dad's business. They've been selling jewelry up to £3,000 online for a number of years. And I asked them about their views on clicks versus bricks. And their click business is now 28% of their total sales. But they don't foresee it becoming 51% for the next 12 to 15 years. I guess the point is, e-commerce technology, it's not going away. It's only going to increase its share of total jewelry sales. As for AI, intelligence, I tend to relate those benefits to manufacturing and smart factories, and what I see and read and hear, that's a few years off general adoption, but it's worth keeping an informed eye on in terms of the sensors and the beacons in stores, some benefit there for supply chain. And again, perhaps another project for one of your millennials or Gen Zers to run with. In the meantime, I'd be focusing on using data to reduce risks and drive profitable growth.
Thank you. Wise words, definitely wise words. Now, I think we're going to have some final thoughts. So, Tiff, over to you. I think you're going to ask a sort of broad question of everyone.
Yeah, I have a question for everyone. Anyone, we have just a few minutes left before the top of the hour. So if a couple of panelists want to be so bold as to opine on, just thinking, really making a prediction, what do you think is going to really happen around data collection and usage that specifically affects our industry? And Michael touched on it a little bit, but anyone else have a bold prediction they'd like to make? Stéphane, please.
Yeah, I think I agree with Michael in a way that consumers are changing. It's not just the data collection that will become different. It's that the consumer themselves, because of the new generation coming up, will have a different view on what we call privacy, the boundaries that we put to ourselves. They have a completely different view on this, it seems. I mean, I spent the weekend looking at the metaverse, which I didn't know anything about this issue of avatars and fashion industry, you know, jumping into this. I mean, it's mind-boggling for me, but that is, I believe, gives you a little bit of a glimpse how the new generation, their comfort zone, which is much wider and bigger, to share in exchange of experiences. So I believe in that sense, there will be an explosion of information coming towards retailers. And, you know, the challenge will be, you know, how to most efficiently within their whole organization, put them to good use.
That makes sense. Anyone else want to jump in?
I can hop in.
Oh, the millennial is
yes,
going to tell us how it's going to be.
I'll say, just from the legal, as a lawyer, I have to say, you know, make privacy a priority. You know, there are a lot of opportunities here, but you want to make sure you're taking advantage of them legally. So it should be, you know, proactive, not reactive situation. Keep your systems up to date. Keep your software up to date. Limit access to the data within your business, and limit the amount that you collect. Those would be my takeaways. And also, this is a, you know, a theme of this talk has been that this is a business way to set your business apart. Again, my generation does prioritize, you know, Michael hit all of the areas that we prioritize: sustainability, ethics, and so on and so forth. So if, again, all it takes is one Google hit of your business, you know, being breached or having an unethical or non-compliant practice, for me not to do business with your company. So avoid that. Be proactive, not reactive.
Great, thank you. I think we're just at
I think
time.
Eric has a point to add.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric.
All I was going to say is I believe that the amount of data flowing between the retailers and the suppliers will increase, even within the next year. But it'll be a bit of a bargain between the two, right? That essentially there will be more demand for this data coming from retailers on the part of the suppliers, but in return, the retailers are going to ask more and more of the suppliers of, well, what can you do for me to help me move my product?
Good. Well, thank you so much. If I can jump in here, Tiffany, Johnny, thank you so much for leading it through that conversation. The consumer is changing, and, you know, the main message is please stay with that change in so many different areas, but especially in the way you collect and use data. Can I pass the floor over to Gaetano Cavalieri, CIBJO President, for some closing remarks?
Thank you very much, Edward. And Stephen, could you please go to the previous slide? I would like to have all the team in a slide. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you, the panelists, the speakers, and obviously attendees, for the following reasons. Number one, I start with the attendees. I have read the list of the attendees, and each one of them are very professional, qualified people. And I want to thank each one of you for having been with us during this virtual Congress. Your contribution, even with the presence or simply with your presence, is important to us, but is more important to the industry. And for this, I thank you. Please criticize us. Please send us your inputs, send us your concerns, and push us to do something better and certainly more, and we will do it. Let me pass on to the, I would say, this dream team of speakers, the six of you. I am amazed. I am amazed. And I want to express my very deep appreciation to each one of you, because I have learned a lot today. And as my father used to tell me, you will never end to learn. But important is that you understand what you learn, because then you have to put in practice. We went to sleep nearly 18, 19 months ago, and we left one world, and then we woke up in another world today, after listening to Tiffany, Johnny, Stéphane, Mia, Eric, and Michael. I have to reconsider this definition. We are in a new dimension. We are not in the new normal, as we have heard since the beginning of the pandemic. We are in a new dimension where not only data, or not only cybersecurity, or not only a laboratory grown diamond, or not only whatever product we sell, every single product has the right to be in the market. But in the meantime, the market has changed. We have heard each one of you saying what you said, and has been a great lesson today, has been a great lesson. And that means that we in CIBJO, the World Jewelry Confederation, we have to upgrade ourselves much more than what apparently we have done during these last 2 years, because as has been said several times from all of you, the consumer has changed, but also the marketplaces are changed. And I believe that being in this new dimension, considering my personal background with several years university and PhDs, and a member of several boards of important companies around the world, including my family company, I believe that we have to be ready for a big jump forward. I have learned that the human being is very afraid to make changes. I believe that we cannot be afraid. We cannot allow ourselves to be afraid to change. We must change. I may remember, and I want to thank particularly Eric for the work that your association, and I can see that Brenda is online with us. Let me say hello to Brenda. That JTB has done an incredible job. I can never forget when I used to go to New York at the Javits Center at the JA, when JA was the #1 fair in the United States. You know, everybody was looking for the red book, but not the one coming from China, the one coming from your association. And the job you are doing is fantastic. If I go to Stéphane Fischler, well, what can I say, Stéphane? I mean, Stéphane is, for me, is a great friend, but apart the very close friendship, he is certainly one of the most clever and visionary person I have never met. And Stéphane, thank you very much for all the messages that you forward to me every day, even if I don't answer, but I read everything you send it to me. Talking now about Michael. Michael, I'm very happy to see you here after a little while. And again, I am truly impressed about your deep knowledge. And I apologize that I never called you before, but from now on, I think that I will call you much often because your contribution to this industry is exceptional. Let me go to Mia. I call Mia not in American style, but in Italian style, Mia, if I may. Well, you have talked about several issues, but all important. But the one I have appreciated the most is the cybersecurity side, because our business needs cybersecurity today and needs cybersecurity today much more to now than ever. Because I remember one of my several masters, in particular one that I did at the London School of Economics. I had a professor that was saying, if you have knowledge, you have competence. If you do not have knowledge, you will stay ignorant as you are. Because he was treating us, people with university degree, with a certain age, as idiots. Maybe he was right, at least in my case. For the other, I cannot say anything, but means that our business need knowledge. And need knowledge because it is important that today the approach, as you all have said, is a completely different approach, is a completely different marketing. I am specialized in strategic business marketing activities and other stuff, but you know, I have understood in these last 2 years that I have had the necessity to study more than ever, to update my knowledge, to increase my communication, to use technology in a different way, considering that I used to fly. You know, the last year I flown in 2019, I flew just a little bit, 1,362,000 miles around the world. I never been more than 3 or 4 days in one place, jumping in another continent, in another place. But I have enjoyed these last 2 years because it's been my best PhD ever I have frequented. And why? Because all of you speakers, all of you attendees, those who are present today, and those who have given us the pleasure, the honor, and personally, I have delighted to have all of you in one home, even though virtual, but still is your home. It is your home. I would like to spend one word on the fact that, yes, in one side, in every single business, there are competitors. And honestly, all the members of our community, and I have repeated several times this concept, our community, because we are a community. In case you didn't realize it, please consider and look to your neighbor on the right and on the left, wherever they are in the world, despite the religion and the skin color, despite the continent, and despite how much money they have in the bank, consider that you may learn from them. Consider that they are your friends by definition, and treat them not as a competitor, but as a people that may help you in doing better and considering new frontier. In this moment, we are all pioneers, because we are in the next step. We are in the next dimension. We are in a different dimension. And we in CIBJO would like to invite all of you to stay with us, to communicate with us, to send us email, to call us on the telephone, to express what you think. Let's talk together, and let's start to have a sort of open forum, independently and regardless, whatever we buy and sell, whatever we produce, whatever it is, rough, cut and polish, color stone, jewelry, gold, it doesn't make any difference. We are all together, and the only way to go forward in order to meet the future, because we are meeting the future, and every day we are meeting a new future. And it is important that we will meet together, I hope soon. And I want, being myself Italian from Sicily, I would like to virtually hug each one of you. And I know the list of the people, and I repeat, each and every one of you, thanking you with this virtual hug for the immense contribution that you have given to the industry, not to CIBJO, which honestly is important. And please do not forget that CIBJO is the only organization in the world which is sitting in the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, the Global Compact, the OECD, and many others. But overall, we are fully committed to few elements. Number one, consumer confidence. Number two, transparency. Number three, full disclosure. Number four, respect. Number six, honesty. Number seven, dignity. And we all together may express all these concepts if we behave responsibly. I remember when I was starting to talk about corporate social responsibility in the late 90s, and then in 2001 in the Congress in Paris, I started speaking about the development goal, and then the 2015 agenda, now 2030, the sustainable goal. Well, I was considered like somebody coming from Mars. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to help each other. Why? Because we deserve it. Why? Because we have done so many sacrifices for generations, and we deserve to win and be successful all together. When the sun is shining, it's shining for all of us. And with this thought, and sorry, I spoke from my heart, and the feeling you gave me today is truly very strong. But with this sense, I want to invite you to join us anytime you wish but I want to now declare open the CIBJO General Assembly, and I want to express my deep appreciation for not only all of you speakers and attendees, but for the entire board, the vice president, the chief financial officer, the entire board of directors and the presidential council, and naturally, the president of the sectors, particularly Roland Naftul, who is with us, and the other sectors, sector B and C, and nearly we will have also another new sector. I want to thank the president of the Colorstone Commission, Mr. Charles Abouchar, the president of Diamond Commission, Mr. Udi Chantal, the president of Ethics Commission that we have the honor to have with us today, Mrs. Tiffany Stevens, the president of Gemological Commission, Mr. Anko Swan, the president of Marketing and Education Commission and executive vice president of CIBJO, Mr. Jonathan Kendall, the president of the Pearl Commission, Mr. Kenneth Scarth, the president of Precious Metal Commission, Mr. Hugh Daniel, the president of Coral Commission, Mr. Enzo Liverino, the president of Responsible Sourcing Commission, Mr. Philip Holden, the entire Internal Finance and Audit Committee, named Mark-Alain Christen, Karina Ratzlaff, and Jonathan Kendall, the president of the Laboratory Grown Diamond Committee, Mr. Wesley Hunt, the president of the Technology Committee that we have the joy to have with us today, Mr. Stéphane Fischler, and the president of the Jewellery Industry Supply Chain Nomenclature Committee, Mrs. Feriel Zerouki. Ladies and gentlemen, I live on my friends, and you all are my friends. People that I have met, maybe never met, or maybe never say hello. Please, the next time that we see each other, let's say hello and have a coffee together, a tea, or eat together. CIBJO is very open to the entire industry, and obviously the most important vital element of the industry is you. Thank you very much.
Gaetano, thank you.
Edward.
Thank you so much for those words, Gaetano. From me, it's just an opportunity to thank you all again, all the panelists and the co-moderators. I'd like to say also a special thanks to Steve Benson, the Director of Communications for CIBJO, who's done an incredible amount of work to put the CIBJO Congress online in a virtual format for the first time in its 95-year history. Thank you so much, Steve, to everything you do behind the scenes to keep CIBJO so relevant and moving forward, and especially with this Congress. So, yes, Gaetano.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was just leaving these, as a crescendo. As a crescendo, it's, I want to express my very special thanks to you, Edward, and to you, Stephen. Without you, what we are doing would never happen. And I want to thank Stephen for having been so passionate to teach me the technology. but I have to say, from the bottom of my heart, truly, thank you, and thank you. Sorry. Edward.
You are most welcome, sir. Finally, from me, I just wanted to tell everybody that after a very busy November with all of these webinars, we're going to be pausing for a while, principally to enable those who sell jewelry to focus on having a very productive festive season. We'll be back next year, 2022. It's just around the corner. We'll be back at Vicenza Oro on January 22nd and the 23rd for another hybrid event. That's a part live, part online, or a phygital event. For those of you who've been following these webinars will know that term, phygital, part physical, part digital. We're kindly hosted by the Italian exhibition group. We all look forward to being in Vicenza for the trade show in late January next year. So until then, happy Thanksgiving, happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas for all of you who celebrate around the world. For all the others, we wish you a restful winter, or for our friends in the Southern Hemisphere, we wish you a joyous summer. But for all of you, please stay safe, stay connected, and keep in touch with CIBJO and CIBJO's work. Keep in touch with each other. Use social media. That technology is only going to go better and bigger places once we get the data protection sorted out. But thank you so much to all of you for being part of CIBJO Congress for this year. We will continue with the continuation and culmination of the General Assembly at Vicenza Oro next year. I wish you a great rest of your day or rest of your evening. Please, if you wish, the lobby area and the chat room there is still active for a while. Please feel free to network with colleagues. Thanks all. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.